The morning sun cast a golden glow over the small town of Crestwood, its rays spilling through the frosted glass windows of a cozy bakery named Sweet Delight. The smell of freshly baked pastries wafted through the air, a comforting aroma that had been a part of the town's heartbeat for decades. But today, something was different. Today, the owner of Sweet Delight, a man named Oliver Hayes, stood across the street, hidden in plain sight. Oliver, a man in his early 50s with salt and pepper hair tucked under a worn baseball cap, looked nothing like the successful bakery owner he truly was. Dressed in faded jeans and a simple sweater, he blended in with the early morning crowd. His heart pounded as he adjusted his fake glasses, the weight of his decision pressing heavily on his chest. For months, Sweet Delight had been struggling. The profits were declining, loyal customers were disappearing, and the once bustling bakery now felt empty. Oliver had tried everything, new menus, promotions, even renovating the storefront, but nothing worked. The spreadsheets and reports on his desk told a story, but Oliver knew they didn't tell the whole truth. So here he was, stepping into his own bakery as a stranger, determined to uncover what was really happening. The bell above the door jingled softly as Oliver entered. The sweet aroma of cinnamon, vanilla, and freshly baked donuts wrapped around him like a warm hug. It was a smell that reminded him of his grandmother, the woman who had started Sweet Delight from her tiny kitchen all those years ago. Oliver's heart ached at the memory. He had promised her he would protect her family legacy, but now he wasn't so sure. He shuffled to the counter, keeping his head down. Behind the counter stood a young man named Tyler, one of the employees Oliver had hired just last year. Tyler greeted him with a smile, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Welcome to Sweet Delight. What can I get you today?" Tyler asked, his tone polite but distant. "Just a chocolate glazed donut and a black coffee, please," Oliver mumbled, deliberately softening his voice. "That'll be $4.75, Tyler replied, his tone flat. Oliver nearly choked. $4.75? For one donut and coffee. Tyler's expression flickered, something like embarrassment crossing his face. "New pricing structure, sir. Management decision." Oliver nodded, hiding his shock as he handed over the money. He took his order to a small table in the corner, one that gave him a clear view of the counter. The donut looked perfect, round, glossy, and inviting, but the first bite told a different story. The texture was all wrong, too dense, almost stale, and the chocolate glaze tasted artificial. Nothing like the rich, velvety chocolate they had always used. As Oliver chewed, his eyes drifted to the back office. Two men stepped out, deep in conversation. Oliver recognized them immediately. Lucas Bennett and Ethan Carter, the senior managers he had promoted just over a year ago. They stood behind the counter, their heads close together, whispering. Oliver strained to hear their words. "Another slow morning," Lucas said, leaning against the register. "At this rate, the old man will be begging us to buy him out by Christmas." Ethan chuckled, a cold, humorless sound. "Oliver's too soft for this business, always going on about quality and tradition. Does he think people care about that sentimental garbage anymore?" Oliver's hand froze midway to his mouth. The old man they were referring to was him, the owner who had trusted them with his family's legacy. His stomach churned, a sickening mix of betrayal and rage bubbling inside him. "Did you see the latest numbers I showed him?" Lucas continued, lowering his voice. "He looked like he might cry. Beautiful work." Ethan smirked. "He has no idea we've been inflating prices and cutting corners. Once he sells, we'll gut this place, rebrand it as something modern, and triple our investment within a year. No more of this family recipe nonsense." Oliver's heart pounded in his chest. Every instinct screamed at him to stand up, to reveal himself and fire them on the spot. But years of experience held him back. If he confronted them now, they'd deny everything. He needed evidence. The bell above the door chimed again, and an elderly woman entered, Mrs. Thompson, a regular who had been coming to Sweet Delight every Tuesday for as long as Oliver could remember. "The usual Mrs. Thompson?" Ethan asked, his tone dripping with fake politeness. "Yes, dear. One blueberry muffin and a small tea, please," she replied with a warm smile. That'll be $6.50, Ethan said, not bothering to hide his boredom. Mrs. Thompson's smile faltered. 6.50. BUTLASTWEEKITWAS. 6.50, but let's tweak it was 5.00. New prices. Ethan cut her off. Costs are up everywhere. Oliver watched as Mrs. Thompson counted out coins from her purse, her hands trembling slightly. This was a woman who had attended his grandmother's funeral, who had cheered at the grand opening of the expanded bakery. Now, she was being treated like an inconvenience by men who were plotting to destroy everything Oliver's family had built. As the morning wore on, Oliver observed more customers coming and going. Many left with expressions of mild disappointment, their loyalty clearly waning. Regular faces he recognized were dwindling, replaced by tourists and first-timers who would likely never return. Just as Oliver was preparing to leave, he overheard one final exchange that made his blood run cold. "I've got a buddy at Crestview Investments looking at the books next week," Ethan whispered to Lucas. "Once he confirms how bad things look, we'll have our offer ready. Oliver won't have a choice but to sell to our shell company." Lucas smirked. "He'll never know it's us until the papers are signed. Here's to Sweet Delight's last Christmas and to Urban Bake's first." Oliver's hands clenched into fists under the table. The betrayal was deeper than he had imagined. These men weren't just manipulating numbers. They were systematically destroying everything that made Sweet Delight special. As he walked out his own bakery, the weight of the betrayal pressed down on him like a physical force. But as the cool air hit his face, something else replaced the shock and pain: determination. Oliver wasn't just a bakery owner. Before inheriting Sweet Delight, he had been a corporate attorney specializing in fraud cases. He knew exactly how to build a case, gather evidence, and deliver justice. Lucas and Ethan had just made the biggest mistake of their lives. They thought they were dealing with a pushover, but they were about to discover the steel beneath Oliver Hayes' gentle exterior. That night, Oliver sat in his home office, surrounded by financial reports and spreadsheets. The numbers confirmed his worst fears. Profits had been steadily declining for months, but something didn't add up. Sweet Delight had always been profitable, even during economic downturns. The next morning, Oliver arrived at the bakery at 4 a.m., 2 hours before anyone else. Using his rarely used master keys, he slipped in through the back entrance. The kitchen stood silent, a far cry from the bustling hub it would become when the bakers arrived. He headed straight for the storage room, clipboard in hand. Methodically, he counted sacks of flour, boxes of cocoa, bottles of vanilla extract, and containers of premium chocolate. Then, he checked these numbers against the inventory system. The discrepancies were immediate and alarming. According to the system, they had used 20 pounds of chocolate last week, but the actual stock was short by nearly 40 pounds. Where did 20 pounds of chocolate disappear to? Oliver whispered, scribbling notes. He moved to the refrigerator. Same story. Premium butter, fresh cream, and organic eggs all showed significant discrepancies. The system showed them as used in production, but the sales numbers couldn't account for such quantities. Before the first baker arrived, Oliver slipped out and drove to his accountant's office. Sarah Miller, Sweet Delight's accountant for 15 years, arrived early herself. "Oliver, what brings you here at this hour?" she asked, surprised to see him. "I need to see something," he said, settling at her computer. "Can you pull up Sweet Delight's price changes for the past year?" Sarah obliged, and Oliver's suspicions deepened. The system showed systematic price increases across all products, some by as much as 50%, all authorized by either Lucas or Ethan. "Did they consult you on these changes?" Oliver asked. "They said you had to prove them," Sarah replied, frowning. "Mentioned something about rising costs and new suppliers." Oliver pointed to several unfamiliar company names. Sarah pulled up the files. New suppliers, again authorized by Lucas and Ethan. "Lucas said you wanted to cut costs," Sarah added. Oliver recognized the game immediately. Lucas and Ethan had switched to cheaper ingredients while raising prices, a double blow that decreased quality and drove customers away. No wonder loyal patrons were disappearing. His next stop was a customer service database. As a creator of Sweet Delight's customer-focused approach, Oliver had implemented a robust feedback system years ago. Every complaint was supposed to be logged, addressed, and followed up on. What he found stunned him. Hundreds of complaints had been marked as resolved without any actual resolution. Comments like, stale products, overpriced, and not what it used to be filled the system. None of these had reached his desk. Oliver printed several pages of evidence, tucking them into his briefcase. That afternoon, disguised once again, he returned to Sweet Delight and positioned himself at a corner table with a laptop. A small microphone hidden in his jacket would record any conversations near him. Within an hour, he witnessed 3 separate instances of what could only be described as deliberate sabotage. Lucas shortchanged a customer, claiming the register was acting up. Ethan told a longtime patron that their favorite pastry was discontinued due to lack of interest, despite Oliver having seen trays of them in the kitchen that morning. Most egregiously, a customer complained about a stale muffin and was met with indifference. No offer of replacement or apology. As closing time approached, Oliver slipped into the back hallway near the office, pretending to look for the restroom. The door to Lucas's office was ajar, and he could hear both men inside. Oliver called today, asking about the price increases. Ethan said, sounding annoyed, "What did you tell him?" Lucas asked, "The usual supplier costs, inflation, blah, blah." He bought it like always. Oliver clenched his fists, forcing himself to remain hidden. "We need to accelerate the timeline," Lucas continued. "That investor from Crestview is ready. Once Oliver sees a quarterly report next week, he'll be desperate to sell." "What about the missing inventory?" Ethan asked. Lucas laughed. "Already taken care of. The books show everything was used in production. If he questions the waste, we blame it on the kitchen staff." Oliver had heard enough. He quietly slipped out and drove straight to his lawyer's office. Attorney Dianachin listened intently as Oliver laid out his findings, occasionally asking sharp questions. "This is deliberate corporate sabotage," she confirmed. "You have enough here to fire them. But if you want to really nail them, we need more concrete evidence of their plan to purchase the bakery through a shell company." "What do you suggest?" Oliver asked. "Set a trap," Diana replied. "Make them think their plan is working. Let them incriminate themselves." Over the next 3 days, Oliver continued his covert investigation. He discovered fake refund records, advertising bills for campaigns that never ran, and evidence that Lucas and Ethan had been mistreating loyal employees to replace them once they took over. When Oliver finally confronted Maggie, the head baker, after hours, she broke down in tears. "I knew something was wrong when they changed your grandmother's recipes," she confessed. "They said you approved it to save money, but I didn't believe them. They threatened my job when I questioned it." Tyler, the young cashier, revealed similar threats. "They've been skimming from the tip jar too," he added quietly, "and telling regular customers that you're planning to sell the business." Oliver's investigation had uncovered a systematic plot far more elaborate than he'd initially thought. Lucas and Ethan weren't just manipulating numbers. They were methodically destroying everything that made Sweet Delight special. The following morning, Oliver arrived before dawn at a small coffee shop 3 blocks from Sweet Delight. Maggie and Tyler met him there, their faces drawn with worry. "I've been wanting to talk to you for months," Maggie said, tears welling in her eyes. "But they monitor everything. Our breaks, phone calls, even who we talk to during shifts." Tyler nodded in agreement. "They've been cutting everyone's hours, too. Most of us can barely make rent now." Oliver felt a lump in his throat. Sweet Delight wasn't just a bakery. It was a community, a family, and Lucas and Ethan were destroying it from within. "Thank you both for your courage," Oliver said finally. "I promise you this ends now." Over the next few days, Oliver set his trap. With the help of a trusted business associate, he posed as an interested buyer, luring Lucas and Ethan into a meeting where they detailed their entire plan on camera. When Oliver finally revealed himself, the look of shock on their faces was priceless. "You've been planning to take over my bakery," Oliver said, removing his hat and fake glasses. "But you forgot one thing. This isn't just a business. It's my family's legacy." The next morning, Oliver gathered the entire staff and several loyal customers in the bakery. He played the recordings of Lucas and Ethan's confession, their voices filling the room as they detailed their sabotage. The room erupted in gasps and murmurs. Mrs. Thompson clutched her chest in shock. Maggie wiped tears from her eyes. Oliver stepped forward, his voice steady. "Lucas Bennett and Ethan Carter, your employment at Sweet Delight is terminated effective immediately. You'll never set foot in this bakery again." As security guards escorted the stunned men out, the room burst into applause. Oliver turned to his staff, his eyes filled with gratitude. "I owe everyone in this room an apology," he said earnestly. "I trusted the wrong people and became disconnected from the heart of this bakery. That changes today." He announced that all prices would return to their original levels, all original recipes would be reinstated, and tips would be distributed daily, with a 15% matching contribution from management. Maggie was promoted to head manager, and Tyler was given a promotion and full tuition assistance for his business degree. The staff erupted in cheers, their relief and joy palpable. 3 months later, Sweet Delight was thriving once again. The morning rush had customers lined about the door, the aroma of freshly baked goods wafting through the neighborhood. Oliver stood behind the counter, sleeves rolled up, helping during the busiest hour. He handed a box of assorted pastries to a smiling customer, his heart full. "Your grandmother would be proud," Mrs. Thompson commented as she accepted her usual blueberry muffin, now properly sized and reasonably priced. Oliver smiled, watching the bustling scene. Sweet Delight wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. And Oliver vowed he would never be blind to betrayal again. The moral of the story? Trust is precious, but vigilance is necessary. A legacy is more than just a business. It's the heart and soul of the community. And sometimes, the hardest lessons make us stronger in the end.